In the beginning, there was one planet, wrought with potential. Magical energy flowed freely through the mountains, the seas, the plains, and the swamps. Even the forests grew in beautiful splendor due to the potential, untapped power of the land. The Eldrazi came from this potential, consuming mass amounts of resources so they can implement their power upon the land. They ravaged this world, destroyed it, divided it, separated it, to the point where it had to stand as 5 individual elements. The creatures of the elements fought and fought, attempting to gain purchase upon the land, attempting to grow, drive, and thrive in their own lands with their own resources to be able to be something. But whenever they tried, the Eldrazi would come. They would destroy their encampments, destroy their leaders and their resources, so nothing could sustain the world they lived on. They fractured the planet, making different planes drift out into space. Eventually, the dragons would rise up and find a way to push them back, to lock them. But now they had the ability to destroy and decimate all that stood before them. The Eldrazi mimic, able to copy the strength of those around it, even momentarily, to punish those that are nearby. So simple, so cheap, so versatile. But the Eldrazi were not creatures of pure destruction. They made for themselves temples, where if they needed more energy from the land, they could tap upon that energy and create more for themselves than any others. Thus, the Eldrazi temples came into play so they may utilize their resources. Mages of all kinds would always attempt to bolster their forces against the Eldrazi, but they would never come to any true success. The Eldrazi utilized these conduits of ruin to summon forth the strongest, the most energy-demanding of their forces to the forefront of their minds, to bring them forth for cheaper, less resources than originally intended, than originally demanded of the world. They were able to come out swiftly and efficiently to ravage the world in the way they individually knew best. The cloud posts and the glimmer posts would always fill the skies when the Eldrazi would come, because they knew how to tap the most resources, the most potential out of those types of lands, out of those environmental effects. Even other things that looked different would come into play as the dreaded cloud posts. The Eldrazi even had ways of removing enemies that were weak and insignificant from the plane of existence that they were on. Spawners of Ulamog have the ability of making endless Eldrazi tokens. sacrificial lambs for their own purposes, throwing them away just for a pinch more of the precious mana that they all require to come and enter this plane of existence from the mind of a mad mage, destroying and desecrating the lands. The Eldrazi conscription. Even though the Eldrazi themselves are mighty and powerful, they will still conscript those to force them into battle, to increase their potential, and to cause more destruction upon the land around them. The Oblivion Soar would rip through the minds of their opponents, finding the lands that laid near the top of their potentiality of memories, to rip them away and utilize them for themselves. Utilize the lands that they were about to tap upon their power for the sake of the Eldrazi forces. And then there's it that betrays, a potent and vile Eldrazi that makes all the memories, all things that one would lay bare onto the battlefield against the Eldrazi, turn around and betray their former master, betray the protection of the realms, so they may taste victory next to the horrid Eldrazi's destruction. All is dust. An ability that the Eldrazi have that is so powerful and devastating, especially when it that betrays is on the field. The two of them can destroy an entire army and revive its inhabitants to fight for the Eldrazi, forcing them into labor that they had never wanted and will regret because their actions shall once more tear apart the world that they all are forced to share together, until it will exist no more as a single harmonious unit, but as dozens of separated segments of potentiality and dreams. The Eldrazi's mightiest power that they had at their disposal was the annihilation that they wrought as a byproduct of them destroying their opponent, forcing the opponent to sacrifice their very mana, their very memory of the land that they would tap on, so they may stand a little longer against this fearsome, monstrous foe that seek nothing but destruction. The spawners of Ulamog were powerful and devastating to any that had to face their full potential, able to bring forth an army from some place out of reach, some place unknown and unattainable to many enemies, to bring an army from nothing into the battlefield with devastating powers, able to remove enemies from the battlefield at a whim, able to take and warp time around them, forcing them to take extra actions that the opponents would be hopeless to fight against, and able to warp the mind of the opponent themselves to take their actions against their own creator, the one that summoned them,